Hi, welcome back to the Story Hour podcast, Voices Unscripted, Stories Rewritten with your host, Sarah Jaswal. I'm really excited about today's episode because today I have my first guest on the show, and I'm really excited to dive deep into this conversation. The topic's going to be around grief and loss and the impact that grief has on our life, and to really shed light on the different losses that we all might face. And just as a disclaimer, I just want to know that this is a conversation. It's going to be meant more for educational purposes. It doesn't replace one on one coaching or therapy or any professional support. So if you are looking for support, please reach out to a professional. It's really just having a dialogue about grief and loss and how it impacts us, and to just shed light on topics that are often overlooked and not talked about. So we're going to dive into that, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, it'd be appreciative if you subscribe and download any episodes, share this with anyone who might need to listen to it and maybe experiencing grief in their own way. So that would be great. And so here we go. Today's guest is Tara Accardo. She is a grief and soul purpose coach and host of the Life with Grief podcast. After losing her parents to cancer within 6 months of each other and navigating a traumatic birth experience, her journey of grieving led her to create Losses Become Gains, a community for fellow grievers that serves tools, resources, inspiration, and guidance on how to navigate grief, loss, and moving forward in life with both in tow. Through her podcast, one on one coaching, and other modalities of support, Tara's passion, calling, and commitment to uplifting and empowering fellow grievers runs deep. Now, welcome in,
Thank
Tara.
you,
Hi.
Sarah. That's beautiful. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited to have you. How are you doing? How are you
I'm
feeling
good.
today?
I feel great. It's really funny I mean, you get this, you're a fellow podcaster, but like when you're on the other side of the microphone and you're not the one kind of doing the hosting and you're a guest, it's great. It's fun. I love doing this. I obviously, I love sharing my story in hopes that it helps fellow grievers around the world in some way, or if nothing else, just helps people feel less alone and just more seen and validated in their experience. So I'm really grateful for this platform that you have.
Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, just kind of a side story of how Tara and I met is just through
Yeah.
online. I think Tara, you had posted something that really like stuck with me, and it was around how grief is felt in the body
Mhm.
and not just in the mind
Yeah.
physiologically. And we mostly think it psychologically. I remember someone else posted one of your carousel posts, and then I saw it, and then I like went onto your page and did a deep dive onto Tara's Instagram page, and I love the
Oh,
content. I'm like,
thank you.
yes, a fellow
Yeah.
griever, which I know sounds crazy probably to a lot of people that we get excited about
I
that.
know.
But it was your content and everything was so
Oh,
great. And so that's how Tara and I
yeah.
connected. And then I actually was on Tara's
Yeah.
podcast several months ago. And so now Tara's my first guest. It just makes sense. And Tara
Mhm.
was actually a big part of me launching my own podcast. And that's a story for another time. But I just want to really acknowledge that. And yeah, I really appreciate you for that,
Thank
Tara.
you. I'm so grateful for you and just this little budding friendship that we have. And no, I'm so honored. We had a
Yeah,
beautiful conversation on my podcast as well. So I'm so happy to switch it up now. It's gonna be great.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's get
All
into
right.
it. So I know you have lots to share, and I mean, unfortunately, you've experienced a lot of profound loss in your life. And so, can you just take us into your story a little bit and like what happened, what those early days of loss look like for you, and what types of loss those were that you experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I and being a guest on podcasts every so often, I've definitely had to narrow down my story a bit because there's a lot of nitty-gritty details I could get into, but I just want to be mindful of the conversation today. And what you just said is really hits home with me too. There's so many losses, secondary losses, anticipatory grief. Like there's so much around, I think today's conversation is going to be very heavily focused on the loss of a loved one and like losses that can stem from that. But I just want to acknowledge anyone here listening who maybe hasn't lost a parent, right? Who might not resonate with me in that way. But just prefacing this, that so many of the types of loss and grief and things that a lot of us can feel can be felt across the board, depending on what we've all been through. So just want to throw that out there. But yeah, as you mentioned, I've lost both of my parents to cancer. So still saying that out loud is very surreal sometimes, even though I know it to be true. just kinda can't believe it happened to me, I guess. I think a lot of us can empathize with that feeling, but yeah, the long and short of it is my mom was diagnosed with esophageal cancer probably around, like, May or June of 2019. I always say this, like, her journey, I'm gonna say was quick on the quicker side in terms of, like, diagnosis to passing, but I wanna acknowledge that that is totally in the eye of the beholder. There's no comparing here, right? Like, some people I've also talked to other grievers where their loved one was diagnosed and died within weeks of each other, you know? So, just wanna, like, put that out there. But so my mom had that. My dad, meanwhile, had prostate cancer during all of that. He had had it for 5 going on 6 years. So that's why I kinda say compared to my dad, my mom's journey was quick. It felt very quick to me at least. And so that was that was a shock. I don't looking back, I'm like, I don't know what was gonna take my mom at the end of the day. I thought it was gonna be old age. We have really good genes on that side of the family, really no history of cancer. So her dying at, oh gosh, what was it? 62, 63, I think it was. I'd have to redo the math, but in my opinion, that's young. And I mean, we like many, mother-daughter bonds. She was my best friend. I still say she's my best friend. I know that woman is all up in my business. She's probably hanging out in this room with me right now watching this.
I
I
love
have
that.
no doubt, she won't leave me alone. Not even death could make that woman leave me alone. And we're just so soulfully connected, I like to say. And now having a daughter myself, which I'll touch on in a little bit, like I really
Mhm.
understand what that meant. And needless to say, that was devastating, devastating, that loss of my mother in December of 2019. So, but what I also realized throughout her journey, I learned about anticipatory grief, which I didn't know what it was at the time. I never knew how to name that. But I think I realized,
Mhm.
frankly, after and once I started educating myself on grief, what I was feeling because I 100%, and I think a lot of people grieving can understand this and empathize with this. If you've had a loved one, especially go through an illness, a disease, whatever of some sort, where they're losing their capacities, they're not themselves, right? Whatever this might look like, dementia, right? You're watching someone's mental capacity change and become different and what you're not used to. Like you're mourning them before they're even gone. And so my mom was mentally very with it until the last probably 2, 3 days of her life. But there was a time where basically the tumor, she had like a 10-inch tumor that was growing into her airway, which is ultimately what was preventing her from being able to breathe. Again, I will spare details for the sake of this conversation, but it was growing into her airway. So they put a stent in there to try and open that up. Like that was in addition to chemo and radiation and things like that was what they were ultimately trying to do. Got to a point where she was about to go in for like another surgery to put another stent in, and they made the call that morning to do a tracheotomy. And I don't know how much experience anyone here listening has with a tracheotomy, but let me tell you, I'm still traumatized from that in some ways. I worked through a lot of it, but like that is such a graphic thing to have to watch a loved one go through and all the things that come along with that. And I had never heard my mom speak after that day. And I was not prepared for that. I was not prepared for never hearing my mom say I love verbally say I love you. You know what I mean? She could write it down, she said it in text and things, but that was horrible, horrible part of the loss. So really the grief that I was feeling before she even died was very, very profound. She passed
Mhm.
away. And then my dad, as I mentioned, was already sick. And in the next like few months after that, ultimately, like he just started going downhill. And I've said this many times before, I genuinely feel he died of a broken heart. And there's science around that and there's studies around that. And I'm not here to throw out numbers. I have no idea. But I know that that is a thing. And and loss can affect a body like that, especially an immune compromised one, right? He already had so Basically, his cancer metastasized, it went into his back and into his brain. A lot of this I did not even know until I had to call an ambulance for him one day. There was 2 times I had to call an ambulance for him. The last time I had to do it, again, a lot of trauma with that. I just found him basically in a catatonic state at home. I feel so much guilt and regret over things I could've, would've, shoulda done differently around all of that. But anyway, he basically just kind of never came out of care after that. He went into the ICU and then eventually into a facility. It wasn't technically hospice yet, but it was like getting there kind of, and then eventually hospice. And so he died in July of 2020. So roughly 6 months after my mom. And of course, this is during COVID. This is like ultimate. I mean, I think people have different ideas of when the height of COVID was, but COVID was really bad at this point. So I could barely see him. I had to call a lot. I when I learned that the cancer was in his brain, because that to me now makes a lot of sense of why he like when I walked in on him that one day and like I was like, "You're not responding to something's wrong with you," was going through my head. And he had never been like that
Yeah.
until this point, and then they told me that and I was like, "Oh my god." So he was a little in and out. So I do have, even though it's not like dementia, right? And like Alzheimer's and things like that, I have some experience with losing a loved one who was starting to lose their mental capacities, right? Up until their death. And that was so hard to watch because my dad was incredibly smart. Not that my mom wasn't, but like my dad literally had a very high IQ, was a Shakespeare aficionado. Like he loved him. He was an amazing criminal defense attorney. He was an artist. I mean, he was just so like rich in skill and life and everything. And my mom was just this bold, fiery Taurus little, 5 foot blonde curly hair thing that just, I mean, brought so much energy to every room and every conversation. And they were just this beautiful contrast of each other. I think it's why they worked so well. But
Mhm.
anyway, so here I was. I'm like in my late 20s at this point, and now both of my parents are dead. And I went through a breakup that same day that I was just mentioning where I had to call the ambulance for my dad. That
Right.
day, I wasn't even coming planning to see my dad that day. It's actually very serendipitous and crazy how this all came to be, but ultimately my now husband and I went through a rough patch, to say the very least. We were just dating at the time. We broke up that day. And I didn't wanna stay at the apartment we were sharing at the time. I was like, "I gotta get out of here." So that's when I went to my dad's house and found him in
Mhm.
that state. And it's crazy to me to think, like, I don't dwell on this, but it's like, "Whoa, what if I hadn't come back and seen him that day?" You know what I mean? Crazy stuff. So and then I was dealing with a breakup too, on top of all of this. And
Wow.
so, I saw the writing on the wall with my dad, and I was very upset about that, but I started therapy around this time because I was like, "Oh, I'm not mentally 100% right now. I'm dealing with a lot. I've barely grieved my mom. Now I've got my dad." I remember the first moment where I knew and I was like, "Oh, wow, I'm going to lose my dad here." Like being faced with that is like, "What?" So,
Mhm.
yeah, and I remember bringing that up a lot in therapy. Like I was almost more a little bit stuck on the breakup because that's a living loss. So here it is, loss kind of number 3, right? This
Right.
living loss, which might be a conversation for another day, but that is another very, very complex type of grief, right? So for anybody who's been through breakups
Right.
here or even friendships ending,
Mhm.
that's a lot too. So, but it was a blessing. That breakup was a blessing. I say that all the time. I didn't feel it at the time, but I did realize it very quickly, actually. That did not take me years to get to that realization because I was like, "Thank God," because I could then focus on myself, not a dying relationship. I could focus on my dad in the last 2, 3 months of his life, and I'm so grateful for that. And I don't think I would have been
And
able to do it.
also to add, had that breakup not happened, perhaps you wouldn't have gone to your dad's house, like you
Just had
said, that wasn't in the
Yeah,
plan to go see your dad that day. So had that breakup not
it's
happened,
scary.
you maybe wouldn't have gone and seen your dad in the state that he was and then took him into emergency
Yeah.
care.
Yeah, and I don't wanna put this out there, I've been like, "Oh, he could have died," but I don't know, he was very dehydrated and things, so it is a little scary I'd like to think I would have, checked on him soon after, but it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, that haunts me a
Yeah.
little bit, not in a way where it's,
Mhm.
it keeps me up at night, but it's just like, "Ooh, oh my god," it's
But like you were saying too, it was a blessing in a
yeah,
way and that you learned that quickly because you said had you in a relationship, then you'd have to focus on someone else. But now you had the time to focus on you. But also, yeah, like maybe if that didn't happen, you wouldn't have been able to take your dad to the hospital.
absolutely. Yeah.
I just want to touch on I had chills as you were talking to when you're talking about the grief before the actual
Mhm,
grief begins, like before the death happens, and how you were sharing about your mom and when they put the tracheotomy
mhm.
in and she couldn't speak after, when you said that you couldn't hear her say I love you again. Oh my gosh, that just like did something to me.
Yeah.
I really want to acknowledge you for sharing and your vulnerability. Like that's a lot. And within 6 months of one another, losing both sets of parents. And I want to touch on that because I think a lot of times we all, I think, as just humans, like to compare grief.
Mhm.
And you mentioned speaking to like how we start to feel grief before the actual
Yeah,
death, whether that's a death loss or whether that's a non-death loss, right? We start to grieve whatever it is that we're going
yeah.
through. Would you say, in your experience, would you say that one is worse than the other? Because a lot
Ooh.
of times I think people think or feel and that there has to be one is worse than the other.
Yeah.
And I've heard actually other people speak to this, especially when it comes to health conditions, that sometimes the pre is actually worse than the post. And I'm just curious of what your lived experience and perspective is on that so listeners can, gain some insight on that.
Yeah, that's an amazing question, thank you for that, and I'm gonna say something that's, like, hard to say out loud because it feels kinda slimy, but I can't not say this because I think there's people out here who might be able to relate to this, and this is hard to admit. With my mom, yes, 1000%, the build up, the lead up or whatever, that was horrible. But you know how there's sometimes again, I hate saying this out loud. Every time it makes me cringe, but like I just have to own it. There's sometimes some relief when and that relief can coexist with the grief. I just want to mention that, right? It's not like we're happy someone's dead. But there can sometimes be relief that they are out of pain, that they're out of a body that has failed them ultimately,
Mhm.
that this again feels slimy to say, but like that we can feel very burdened sometimes by people. Especially, I want to acknowledge like anybody who has experience with caregiving. I I I just touched on that a little bit, or like I have a little bit of that in my story, but not really. And it can be exhausting and traumatizing and heavy and awful to carry the weight of someone who is ill or has a disease or something like that, you know? And it can sound real that can sound really selfish to say, but I just want to validate here for anybody like we're only human, right? And when we love someone so much, we want to see them well. We want to see them healthy and thriving and it can just be I guess my point is it can be so painful to see them in that state. So, again, I want to normalize feeling some relief but also equal parts, devastation when someone we love dies like that.
Yeah.
So it's very common to feel that relief. I just want to, get that out there. I can't say I felt that so much with my mom. I mean, of course, I was relieved for her sake that she was out of pain, out of a cancer ridden body, things like that. But I really felt no peace when when she died. And I'm not gonna say I did feel peace when my dad died, not at all. In fact, the morning that he died, I always say that it was like a beautiful day. It was like it didn't even feel like the world should still be turning, you know what I mean? But it was like the most picturesque, quiet, amazing day in July. And I remember like looking out of my back patio door because he died like around my parents died 5 minutes apart by the way and like one was 3:23, one was 3:27 in the morning. There's something in that witching hour, I swear. That's when a lot of people a lot of people go. But so clearly, I didn't sleep. So I was like watching the sunset or sunrise and just looking out and being like, I'm scared. I've never felt this alone in my life. Like, what do I do from here? I have no one, is what it felt like. I know I had people. I have a beautiful support system and everything, but it's like that's the crazy part about losing parents especially. And I want to acknowledge anyone here who maybe doesn't have the best relationship with parents. This can get very complicated very quickly, but for those of us who, are close with
Right.
our parents, have a good relationship, that was really scary for me, actually. And so, yeah, well, I was going to go in a different direction with that, but yes, to kind of hopefully come back and answer your question. There I didn't feel relief with my dad, but for so long I felt like that other shoe was going to drop, and I was like, there it is. There's the other shoe. Okay, let me process this now. So it's like almost that kind of state of hypervigilance I feel like I was in for 5 or 6 months,
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
finally stopped, I guess. So it was more relief over that. Not that my
Mhm.
dad was dead, but, like, and then
Mhm.
and also a little bit of a way, like I said, my dad was I don't think he knew how to do life without my mom. So I was, like, almost felt some relief that they were together. That's what I like to think, right? Like, I'm like, "Oh, thank God
Mhm.
they're reunited." If he couldn't be here for me, I want him to be there with her. And there was something
Right.
about that
There's
that brought comfort. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's comfort and solace in
Yeah.
that, and I know that can be hard for a lot of people to hear,
Mhm.
and sometimes it doesn't come right
Yeah.
away, and sometimes it takes time, and sometimes you never get there, you never find that comfort in that,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's
Yeah.
tough. Like 6 months apart and yeah, just the pre-grief and then the relief and something you touched on, which I think is so important, especially in this context of losing someone to a health condition
Mhm.
and being sick is, you mentioned being a caretaker. Of course, you're going to help and support, but it's a lot,
Yeah.
right? And it takes me into my next conversation I wanted was around secondary
Yeah.
losses, which you did touch on as well.
Mhm.
And I think this is such a big one, and you hit it. We often talk about secondary losses and grief, which touch every corner of our life,
Yeah.
like so many secondary losses. And caretaker, so I always talk about this too, is change of roles.
Mhm.
And this is such a prime example, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going from being a regular daughter and, doing mother-daughter things, and now you're having to be a caretaker to your
Yep.
mom. And like, yes, you're still the daughter, but your whole identity almost shifts to now being a caretaker.
Mhm.
In a way, a lot of people express that, and it's hard because you still have your own life to juggle and
Yeah.
to manage and all of that. And so I wanted to touch on secondary losses. And so I'm curious, what were some of those losses for you and how did they impact your grieving journey?
Yeah, great question. I mean, a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, great point. Kind of having to redefine, like, what does daughter mean? What do I look like now? My own freaking grandmother, my mom's mom, called me an orphan. I was like, Grandma, I love my grandma. Like, we're fairly close. But she's of a different generation, and she's like, I worry for you, you're an orphan now." And I was like, "You know what? I don't resonate with that word." For some reason, it just makes me feel like I've been abandoned at, like, an orphanage somewhere, and I'm like, "No, my parents didn't want to leave me. This is just the circumstance but yes, I guess by definition, I'm an orphan." But, like, it was that, and definitely what you mentioned in terms of the identity, and so for me, I'm just like, "Okay, what," and this is, again, time, lots of things, contributed to some of these thoughts, but, like, what kind of woman do I wanna be now? What do I even wanna do with my life? What is my purpose here? Definitely, more specifically with these, like, secondary losses, that sense of safety that a lot of us can feel, like I was mentioning earlier, I was scared. Like, I felt fearful a little bit going on in the world without my parents. There's a little bit of, like, body armor that I sort of felt like I lost a little bit. Even though I was, like, a grown adult, like, there's still this comfort, a little bit of a safety net that we sort of feel with our parents there, and then when that is taken from you, you're kind of on that tightrope, and you don't uh, there's nothing to catch you, is sort of what it feels like. So, that was a big thing. And then for me too, I guess I don't really know how I would classify this in terms of like a secondary loss per se, but I went through a really arduous, exhausting 3-year probate process. I live in California, so there was lots of fun things that I had to do to get my parents' estate settled, and there was so much about that I just wanted to just check out from. I wished so many times that I just had literally anybody else that could help me with it, but I don't have siblings, right? There's no one else. Like I had a support system. I had people that could be like, "Oh, you'll get through it, sweetie. Like we're here if you need anything." But like they're not legal counsel. They weren't my CPA. They weren't, And so it's just one of those things like I felt like I had to grow up fast. Like, yeah, I was grown up, but like we're always kind of growing and evolving, right? So I just felt like there was so much that they don't teach you in school about losing 2 parents very quickly, and so just those learning experiences, and then definitely certain relationships and things like, my husband, of course, and we spoiler alert, we got back together, but there was a lot that came from that too. I would say actually positives because we had some really deep, very important conversations that we needed to have.
Right.
So that was, in a positive direction in my life, but certain friendships or certain ways that I related to people definitely changed. A lot of friendships
Mhm.
survived and thrived, but there was definitely people in my life where I was like, "Wow, you didn't really show up for me
Right.
the way I sort of thought you would." And I definitely, cancel culture is such a thing right now. So I'm definitely not like canceling anybody, but it was humbling. I was like, I might need to
Yeah.
take another look at who I'm keeping close and who I'm relying on and who's really in my corner versus
Mhm.
not, I guess. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's such a I could go on and on, but there's such a ripple effect. Yeah.
I Yeah, and that's the point I want people listening is that it's not just one
Yeah.
loss. It's all these other losses that we experience after that primary loss, and then it's
Yeah.
compounded, and it just becomes a one on top of the other, and we don't give ourselves enough acknowledgement about those other losses, and a lot of times we don't even know that,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's a loss, and that's a loss, and
Yeah.
that's a loss," and that's why it's so cumulative, and so this is why I think it's such an important aspect of grief to touch on. And you mentioned something, navigating the estate, like
Mhm.
after. And again, also wanted to mention that you are an only child. So that definitely plays in all with everything that Tara's sharing is like not having any siblings. Like, yes, you had support, but you are the only family member.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what we perceive is that after the funeral, it's like everyone else goes back to their normal life and work and day to day. And then the person, the family who's lost within that family is having to deal with all the aftermath. And we won't get into all of that today, but there's so much that comes after the funeral. It's not just like, okay, now we can start grieving
Yeah.
and going about our life and rebuilding. There's so much. And I think what you touched on with the estate is such a big one that is often not talked about that
Mhm.
much. You're faced with loss. You just lost both your parents and now you're dealing with the aftermath
Yeah.
and have no idea because we weren't taught these things. And now you're basically on your own trying to fend for
Yeah,
yourself.
and it kinda made the grief worse, to be honest with you, and it delayed my grief in some ways because I was like, "Oh my god," or I had to learn how to compartmentalize a lot, and I also
Mhm.
felt some resentment over the fact that, like, my parents did everything right. They did everything that they could. They had wills and things set up, but in California, it's really annoying and it's very I won't even get into all of this, but like basically everything has to be in a trust. If you really want to make sure everything goes to a certain person or people that you want it to,
Right.
like it basically needs to be in a trust. And I'm like yelling at my in-laws. I was like, you better get your ish together because I'm not going through this again selfishly.
Yeah.
I was like, I
Yeah.
cannot deal with you guys. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then there's 2 things I wanna quickly mention. Number 1, with the siblings thing, I wanna acknowledge, just because you have siblings does not always make it easier. It's
That's
a
true.
blessing and a curse being an only child, right? Like, yes, if I had lovely supportive siblings where no one was fighting over anything and it was all great, yeah, I woulda loved the help, but I've talked to many people who have siblings that are less than helpful. If anything, they make it worse. People get very greedy. I've
Yeah.
witnessed it in other, unfortunately, family passings and even in some of my husband's family, like, it's crazy what some people have to go through. So I just wanna acknowledge that for anyone here, just 'cause, yeah.
That's true, yeah, and I guess thank you for bringing that forward because, yeah, it's not that it's easier one way or the other, but there's a
There's
lot of
nuances.
nuances, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's so true. Thank you for bringing that forward,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I always feel like I have to mention that, but also, you mentioned, like, the funeral and stuff, that was, something else that was really hard for me because it was COVID, and because COVID happened, like, it started right after my mom died. Because my mom died in December, I wanted a celebration of life. I did not want anything, so that was, like, so not my mom. She was like, "Funerals, no." And both of my parents were cremated. So, I was like, I wanted to do something, like, in spring in the gardens, like, I wanted to put on, like, almost like more of a party, right? It's what she would have wanted. And then
Yeah,
my dad died, and then it was the height of COVID. They've never had a funeral. There's never been a celebration of their life. We've done, like, little small things with each side of the family, but, like, and I still feel some guilt over that. I almost feel like they weren't honored well enough for, like, their life and everything that they did and contributed to the world, and so I just wanna, like, acknowledge anyone who maybe went through that or something during COVID, but,
right,
then I'm just like, "Okay, give yourself grace." You talk about them all the time in the work that you do, like, I'm constantly talking about my parents on Instagram and all the
yeah,
things, so I'm like, "Chill out, Tara,
which
like,
I
you're
love, by
honoring
the
them,
way,
like, it's fine."
I yeah,
It's just like, you talk about your parents more than most people probably do after the funeral, but, just we have to be really picky and choosy with where we, like, get on ourselves about things, and then we just have to release and let a lot of other things go, and I understand the what ifs, and I understand the coulda, woulda, shouldas that we can all feel after someone goes through a lot. There's so many things looking back that I wish I did differently. Wish I had spent more time with them in the hospital and things. I wish I had tried hard, but, I have to remind myself, and this is just the message I wanna get across to anyone else listening today, like, so often we are doing the best we can at the time and with what we are equipped with mentally, physically, emotionally. I think there's a lot of us, we are we're protecting ourselves a little bit too, whether or not we realize it. I 100% think I was doing that with, like, certain things where I was just like, "Oh, I almost, like, I can't get too close because it's too hard. It's too painful." And so I've really reflected on that a lot over the years and some of I'm gonna say behavior, not that I, like, behaved badly, but just, like, sometimes where I felt like I maybe got a little distant. I think I genuinely was like, my nervous system, I was, like, trying to protect myself.
you talked about distant from your feelings and emotions or distant from, like, your parents while it was
Maybe a
happening?
little of both. If I Sarah, I've never said that out loud before, actually. This is, like, your podcast. This is, like, the first time I'm ever really kind of admitting that, but it's true. Like, I was very involved with my parents and I was seeing them all the time and my mom and stuff, but, like, for example, with the tracheotomy stuff that my mom went through, there was gonna be a time where we were gonna have to, like, help her clean it and all of the things, and again, it's very graphic. And that I also just don't do well with, like, bodily function and stuff like that, and that was really hard.
Mhm.
I never said no, I was going to try, but the idea I don't even wanna get too graphic about it, but, like, just the idea of having to help do some of those things really, like, I wanted to run out of the house. It really, and I showed
Mhm.
up the best I could, but I can imagine to my mom, I might have seemed a little like, "Okay, I'm here, I'm helping," but, like, inside I was
Mhm.
panicking
Mhm.
because I just couldn't,
Mhm.
it was too much for me. But
Yeah.
I just, again, and this is what I just wanna get across, like, we've never been through anything like this before. I had lost
Mhm.
family members here and there. I had lost a couple grandparents, not to say that so flippantly, but, like, um, I had lost a cousin, but I was younger when those things happened, and so, I grieved those in the way that I could at the time, but these are my parents. These are people intimately, and again, so if anybody here has lost a grandparent, a sibling, someone in your really immediate family, like, it hits different. And so, yeah, there's certain things that I just, again, upon reflection, I think I shielded myself from quite a
Yeah,
bit.
of
But
course, it makes sense, and I think what's important to note here too is, I talk about often as well, is, like, how it changes the family dynamic,
yeah.
and of course, the person who's sick is obviously going through it. They're in pain, they're suffering, they're going through all of
Mhm.
that. But the family members are also
Yes.
going through it in their own
Mhm.
way. And I think a lot of times we can feel guilt about that because they're like, well, I'm not the one that's actually
Yeah.
sick. Like, I'm not the one that's on the hospital bed. But it's like the family members also are navigating their own grief, their own inner turmoil. And like you said, I think it's very common to want to turn from those, especially when they're so graphic and you're so involved in it.
Yeah.
And so I want to normalize that for people who are listening, that if you have a family member or a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, a friend who's going through something and you're feeling some type of way, you're feeling the grief, you're feeling the loss and the pain and your own emotions, that it's very normal. And it's not
Mhm.
comparison. It's not like, well, I'm not sick, because you're human.
Yeah.
We're human at the end of the day. Our feelings are valid, our emotions are valid.
Mhm.
And so I think what you touched on is so important. How old were you when you lost? You said you were late
Yeah,
20s?
so I think I was at 28. Yeah, and then I turned
Okay.
29 the following year with my dad. That sounds about
Right.
right.
Okay. So
Yeah, so late 20s.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was just curious because you mentioned it a few times, so late
Mhm.
20s. There's something else that you've shared
Mhm.
publicly, and so I just want to touch on that as well, because you've gone through these two losses with your parents, and then you also had that breakup in
Mhm.
between there. I know you've mentioned pet loss. I'm not sure
Mhm.
when that was, but something that you shared publicly that I thought was very prevalent, I think, for a lot of people, and maybe not, but maybe just shedding light onto it, is your experience of becoming a
Mhm.
mother. And I know you shared that you had a really traumatic birth story with your
Yeah.
daughter. And so, yeah, shed light on that for us. But how did becoming a mother, especially through a traumatic birth story without your own mother, impact your already grieving journey?
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. And so I definitely won't go I'll give you the Spark Notes version of my birth and all of that. But yeah, one thing I just also want to touch on, like in terms of these secondary losses, because we could, skipping ahead to my birth, but my parents missed my wedding. They missed my engagement too, actually. So engagement,
Mhm.
wedding, like getting pregnant, like all these things, right? So I just want to acknowledge that anyone going through the day-to-day moments are awful without them too, right? But these milestones, and it's another reason why I always say, like, throw the timeline out the window because, these things continue to come up and new layers of our grief kind of continue to unfold. So that's another.
Well, your exact words, kick
Yes.
rocks with your timeline.
I know I've said that to you before. I'm just like,
I had
kick
to.
rocks with the timeline.
I had to bring that into our conversation. So, if
So
anyone
funny.
listening, Tara and I had connected a couple of days ago, and she had said that in passing, and I wrote it down because I thought it was so good. And I'm like, I need to use that. I'm gonna like post it up on my fridge or something
You're
where I
obsessed.
see it, and not just with grief, just with
Yeah.
anything. But I think humor is
It's
so
so
it's so nice to bring
important.
humor into grief.
Yeah.
That's gonna be quoted. Kick rocks with
I'm
your timeline.
obsessed. I love it. No,
Yeah,
literally, like, humor and dark humor is, like, definitely a coping mechanism of mine.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's so true.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No, it's
side-swept, but
okay.
I had to insert that. It was, like, perfect timing too.
I love it. No, it's so true. Like, yeah, words of wisdom, very, very, really eloquent words of wisdom. But yeah, kick rocks at the timeline. The timeline needs to kick rocks because it's so unrealistic. And so that's just an example of why, right? Like we keep going through these
Yeah,
things without loved ones, whoever it is for you. They're missing these things, right? Again, I like to think that they're around and they're seeing everything, but it's not the same as them being here in person. So I just want to say that.
right.
But yeah, so I had my daughter, as of the time of this recording in last year, so January of 2024, and I had a very normal pregnancy. I'll be honest. I was quite blessed. I had a little morning sickness, things in the first trimester, but nothing alarming, right? And then fast forward to this week in January, we had just done our uh like maternity photos or whatever. And just that week, later in the week, this is like Thursday, Friday now, I was just feeling her move less and less, and it was alarming to me. And again, without going into all of the nitty-gritty details, Saturday morning I wake up and I tell my husband, I was like, I want to go to the emergency room. I want to go to the hospital. I don't feel good about this. I this isn't right. And just really following my intuition here. And this story is a very beautiful, it's a big lesson in intuition. Um, because my daughter wouldn't be here if it were not for me listening to my intuition. So, and I say that very literally. So we go, they get me all strapped up. They're like looking at heart rates and all the things. And basically, they're having me do a lot of different things, and then I, like, turn onto my right side, which, for anyone who's, like, familiar with being pregnant or having kids or whatever, you're supposed to, like, lay on your left side because that's where all like, your heart is, all the blood flow, whatever. So they were just like, "Okay, turn to the right," and then everything plummets. And they were like, "Okay." So it had basically been decided at that point that she again, they were a little not comforted by the lack of movement. I don't think they, like, kinda knew what was going on yet, but it had been decided that an emergency C-section was gonna happen. It was just, was it gonna be that Saturday or was it gonna be the next day? So they had, like, given me a shot to help open up her lungs because she was gonna be 5 weeks early, and but because of that plummeting of her, like, everything, they were like, "Okay, so change of plans. We're gonna get you into surgery right now." I was like, "Okay." So, go through the C-section. The C-section itself went great, as good as a C-section can go. They delivered her, didn't hear her cry at first, that was very scary, but eventually we did. But she came out, I mean, when I say pale as a ghost, I'm not even saying pale, she was white. We still don't know exactly what happened, but from what the reports say, like, essentially all of her, like, fetal blood had leaked into my own blood system somehow.
Mhm.
So, she was essentially without oxygen. So, that's why they were saying, I had multiple doctors and nurses say to me, "If you hadn't come in when you did, sh like, even if you had come even a day later, she would not be alive."
Just have
I
chills
know,
all
and
over
so,
my
like,
body.
living with that, I'm like, "Okay." So, like, wow, because you just as the mom especially too, that baby is growing inside of you. You have to be so in tune with them, and it scares me. It's like scares me. I'm like, what if my husband was the one pregnant with her? He would have been like, "Ah, no, it's fine." Because that's what he was telling me. He was kind of like
Yeah.
not being dismissive in like a bad way, but he was just like, "Are you sure? Like, I feel like you're just, she's getting bigger. She has less room to
Mhm.
roam around in there." And I'm like, "That's true in the third trimester, but like this feels different. I can't explain it, but I'm just go with me. Trust me on this." Thank God.
Right.
So anyway, so yeah, so she came out, my poor husband, because there was a lot of trauma for him around a lot of this too. He's not really lost anyone close to him. So, like, I had had quite a bit of experience in hospitals and emergency situations and things, but he's never really experienced that. So, to go through it first with a child is awful. I don't wish that on anybody, but so that's one thing. We've had to really, like, communicate and love on each other and work through as a couple, right? And how to be there for each other, especially because there's gonna be days when, like, one of you is at not maybe not 100%, but is doing better than the other one, right? And, like, how do you lift each other up and all of that? And so basically, she had a couple of blood transfusions there, and then they had to transfer her to another hospital. We live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so a really incredible, thank God, children's hospital down in Oakland, California, Benioff, it's called, to do like another transfusion with like plasma and other things that like they just couldn't do for her at that hospital. So of course, I wasn't going anywhere. I just had major abdominal surgery. So I'm telling my husband, like, go be with her, please. Like, and thankfully his family all lives around here. So his mom, his dad, his sister, our brother-in-law, they were all there with him. Meanwhile, I'm in this recovery room trying to, like, get my milk production to come in, like, because that was I will never forget what this woman, I think it was, like, a lactation consultant, but she was like, "The best thing that you can do for your daughter right now is get that colostrum going because that's what she need that is liquid gold, and that is gonna, like, help save your baby." You know what I mean? Like, that's what she's gonna need right now. So I was like, "Okay, that's my one job. If that is the one thing in my control in a time where literally it feels like I have 0 control over anything, that's what I'm gonna do." But that was an awful night, just you're just robbed of so many things, like, being able to have that skin to skin contact with her, just the beautiful, yeah, birth is extreme and it hurts and it's painful and stuff, but, like, generally just that beautiful sort of calm experience that I wanted so badly for her and myself out the window. I just felt like I was robbed of all of it, and being able to hold her. It was like 3 days before I could hold her with all of this, and it was, like, almost kinda taking me back to that alone feeling of, like, the morning my dad died and then, like, went like, didn't have either of my parents, and I was like, here I am in this room, and I'm just like, I never wanted them more. I'd wanted them a lot of times over the years between when they died and that moment, but I just remember, like, sitting in that room just crying, and I was like, "Oh my god." Like, so is this rock bottom? I don't know. I thought it was rock bottom when my dog died, and then there was this, and I was like, "I don't know how much more I can take." So, I don't know. Fast forward, our daughter spent 19 days in 3 different NICUs. She thankfully, I can sit here and say she is thriving, and I the to say I'm grateful is such an understatement, but, it was touch and go, and it was just and again, and recovering from surgery on top of it, and all of these things, and it's just those times when you have a great support system, but it's not the same for me. I'll speak for myself. It was not the same of not having my parents there for
Mhm.
any of that. And then just parenting in general after that. And like, of course, I want my dad here for sure. He'd have the most beautiful relationship with my daughter. I know that. But yeah, just again, that mother daughter bond, and especially having a daughter, right? Like, just not being able to get to share that with her and ask her questions and just do girl stuff. Like, it's just devastating. Like, I'm not gonna be eloquent here for a second. It just sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
I hate
I
it.
want you to be, raw. Give us the
Yes, girl,
real
that is
raw.
the rawest part of me. I'm just like, "This just effing sucks." I
Yeah.
didn't sign up for this, and so, yeah.
You were sharing that too, like, I can actually feel the tears. I'm like, "You're really well put together," but I can feel that, and, God bless, I have both my parents, but I imagine, like, putting myself into your shoes, and I can just feel that, and I can yeah, just sharing, like, the chills of intuition, like, everything that you're
Yeah,
sharing,
intense.
my heart just goes out to you because that's a lot in a matter of, like, a year, however long, couple years it was.
Yeah, I think because once so, like yeah, mom and dad died in 2019, 2020, lost my dog in 2021. So, yeah, I had, like, a couple-year break, and then all of that happened.
Yeah, well,
So
yeah, 'cause you said 2024 you had her,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it just yeah, and then
Well,
and I just want to acknowledge here for anyone who has had a difficult birth or like a NICU experience, like that grief and the trauma from all of that, it does not end when you're sent home from the NICU because like all babies, have follow-ups and checkups and things like that, but like when my daughter was first born because of the lack of oxygen, there was like they did like scans and things and, like, in an MRI, there was, like, these little spots on her brain that I think were kind of without oxygen maybe for longer than other parts of her, and they were like, "We need to keep an eye on those, like, she could be developmentally delayed because of this and da 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 da." And my husband, bless his heart, is, like, a little bit of a hypochondriac, so he was freaking out about that, and it took him a long t probably a very solid year of her life, so just earlier this year, for him to really see that she's doing very well and, like, absolutely perfect and fine for her age, but, like, I know doctors have a job to do, and I don't think they mean to fearmonger, and they just wanna be very honest, but, like, the bedside manner, or lack thereof sometimes, is shocking, and so I was like, "Oh, you have no idea who you're talking to right now. My poor husband, he is not gonna recover from this." And so, just acknowledging that too, and so
thank you for bringing
yeah,
that forward because I hope as you're listening to this that you can really see the
yeah,
complexity of grief and the many layers it has, and it doesn't just go away. Like you said, 2019 you lost your mom, and then 2020 your dad, and then 4 years later you had your daughter, and you're still grieving. Like, you're still longing and that desire
yeah.
that you wish you had your
Longing is the
parents
perfect
there.
word for it. Yeah.
I want really people to understand, and we always say it in the grief world, is like, I say this often, is that, and it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but it's the reality of life and grief is like, you're never going to stop
Yeah.
grieving. The grief is never going to go away. As long as your loved one is not
Mhm.
here, you're going to grieve them for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. Like, it gets maybe perhaps easier, and not always. Like, you could be 20 years in and you could still feel the depths of your grief, the pain, the sorrow,
Mhm.
but you learn coping mechanism, you learn tools, you learn resources, and you start to rebuild your life brick by brick. one step at a time. And I know at the beginning it doesn't seem like that, but you do get to a point where you can grieve
Mhm.
fully and you can also live fully. And I think that's just really important to note. And just hearing Tara's story is like, it didn't go away. The grief, maybe even I would say, amplified during that time because your parents aren't there and then you're alone. You can't do skin to skin. Your husband's off with your
Yep.
baby and you're doing what you have control over.
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of nuances and it's very
Yeah.
complex. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being so vulnerable
Oh, yeah.
because I know it's not an easy story to share always. And just on that, kind of transitioning a little bit into rebuilding.
Mhm.
Let's talk about transformation and rebuilding because I think that's a really important aspect to grief,
Yeah.
and you're a testament to that. And so when we think about grief can make our worlds feel very meaningless.
Mhm.
Like, what's the point? What am I doing? What's my purpose? What's my identity? Who
What
am
am I doing
I?
here?
Like all those questions, you're just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, how did you begin finding meaning again? And what did that? I know you talk a lot about self
Mhm.
discovery, finding your purpose, and transformation.
Yeah.
So, what did that self discovery and transformation journey look like for you?
Yeah. I would say this really started, frankly, after my dog died. Like, I think it started before that, but then, like I said, I mean, she's my 19-year-old fur baby. I always joke she was like the sister I never had. That was awful. And then, and just how it all happened. I won't even go into all of that, but she just basically had an adverse reaction to a rabies shot that she absolutely didn't need, and died like 2 or 3 days later. And it was horrible, and I carried a lot of guilt and regret over that because the vet insisted. I was the one that was like, "Okay, let me go against my intuition and have her get this shot so I can get the meds that she needs," and then that happened. And so there's a lot of like reckoning I had to and healing honestly that I had to do around that. So that's when I think a lot of this also started coming up for me, but even before all of that, I was actually gifted a book probably several months after my dad died, um, what was it? It's by Glennon Doyle Melton, and I'm blanking on the name right now. It's not Big Magic, it's, Untamed, and it's not a grief book, but it's like she definitely hints about some of that in there, but, like, tells a lot of different stories, and oh my god, did it resonate with me, like, anybody who wants a good book, like, read that. So I for in terms of, like, really specific kinda, like, coping tools that even just help me get on this path, journaling, I know that is, like, such a buzzword and such a thing now, but I found a journal that and I eventually created my own, but originally, I found a journal that was just, like, a really nice little, like, 5-minute journal, so it's, like, little morning practice, little evening practice, and when I mentioned I made my own, like, literally, it's available on Amazon, and it's kind of a similar gist, but it's, like, specifically for us grievers. I wanna create something specifically for those of us who are grieving. So it's like a very intentional 5-minute practice a day. So anyway, that's what I meant by that. But journaling was really big for me. So that was one. Walking, I'm just a habitual walker anyway. I get that from my mom and my dad, I would say. And so getting out was very, very critical for my mental health to make sure I was not just like sitting there wallowing on the couch. When my dog was still alive, that was also very helpful because I had to take her out.
Mhm.
And, seeing friends and things like that too, but I'll be honest, I definitely went a little inward. I sort of self-isolated a little bit, and you have to be really careful with that because, you don't wanna slip into loneliness, and I have clients that do this, like, they are aware they're self-isolating, but it's not in a good way, and it's like, it's
Mhm.
actively hurting them at this point. And so I just
Yeah, I just wanted to say on that point too, between turning inwards and self isolating and that being okay, because I also tend to do
Yeah,
that. That's my response. But I'm now, just because I'm equipped with the tools and the knowledge and the resources, that I know when it's a slippery slope.
yeah,
I know when it's unhealthy versus healthy. Because I think there is a level to it that's healthy. I
yeah,
think we do need to turn inwards. I think we do need to isolate. We need to shut off the noise and deal with our
done.
emotions and our thoughts, like the voices in our head. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that
Yeah,
because there is a point where it gets very unhealthy, and so just being mindful of
yeah.
that. So yeah,
'Cause we
thank
don't wanna
you.
add to the loneliness that we're already feeling, right? And we are
Yeah,
going through a bit of a loneliness epidemic, at least in the US,
yeah.
I think. So it's like,
I think
yeah,
worldwide.
it's not pretty. Community is really,
Yeah,
really important. So having the right community, that was
yeah.
big for me. So it was a nice balance of
Mhm.
community and friends and things, but also having my me time to process everything, and I had to keep working, like I still had stuff going on. And then my husband and I got, well, boyfriend at the time, whatever, we got back together. I was building on that, just finding my joy, my happiness again.
Mm.
And so anyway, so there's a lot of things I did to kind of help myself along,
Right.
brick by brick, as you so beautifully said, which that's so true, step at a time. And then, funny
Mhm.
enough, this is a little woo-woo, so I'm not saying anyone has to go to a psychic medium, but that has been very cathartic for me. I found a good one that I really trust that gives me a lot of very specific information that she would not know otherwise and all the things. I go to her maybe a couple times a year or something. And I first went like probably only a week or two after my mom died, which arguably was way too quick. She had like barely crossed over, I think, and it was like I don't think it helped me much. But later on, I went
Mhm.
once my dad died, and I was like, "Ah, okay, they're fine." So I'm choosing to believe. But funny enough, I was in a conversation with her actually, and it was like towards the end of a session, and I was kind of expressing to her, mind you, again, this is like timelines, right? But like probably like a year and a half after my dog died. So now all my immediate family's dead, right? I'm going through all of this, and I was expressing to her, like, I'm starting to just feel very, like, inspired to talk about grief and everything I've been through and just help people, I guess. But, like, I don't know what this looks like or what this means. And within that conversation, I literally have it recorded, this idea of like finding gains from your losses came up. And then so the term losses become gains came in that conversation. I was like, "Ooh, that's good. There's something there. There's some magic in that. What does that mean?" And so I got off the phone and I felt so inspired and I was like, "Oh my god, I need to like get this energy out. I need to do something." And I'd always wanted to start a blog. I love writing. Writing's a big thing for me. And so that's where I started. And so literally that year, so this is 2022, I guess. I Sorry, I'm trying to think of my timeline. Yeah, anyway, 2022, I just, like, wrote, like, that whole year, just various pieces. It was really cathartic for me. I think it
I love
also
that. I love writing
helped
too.
me heal as I was, like, gonna try and help other people heal if anyone else had even wanted to read it, but anyway, I launched it in, like, November of 2022, and I'm not gonna say it, like, blew up or took off or anything, but, like, I found other grievers. I found other people that still follow me, that are still with me, that are like, I get what you're saying. Thank you for writing about this. Thank you for
Mhm.
calling this out. And so the more and more sort of like validation I got, not about the work I was doing, but just I wasn't alone. It felt
Yeah.
so good. And that feeling was like addictive. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Right.
How else can I help? So within like a month or two of that, I was looking up like how to become a grief coach because I'm like, no, I want to coach. I want to like make this my life's work and my life's mission to like help people. So I got certified in that. And then the following year, so yeah, 2023, I think like Mayish, I tried to align it with my parents' birthdays, which was May 23rd and 20th. Um,
Mhm.
Launched the Life with Grief podcast, which was originally the Losses Become Gains podcast. I did rebrand, but and I love podcasting, obviously. And that has
So fun.
just led to so many incredible conversations, just like the one that we had and just like we're doing now. And yeah, just,
Yeah.
amplifying and highlighting other stories of grief and loss, losses that I have not experienced, I can't speak to, but I want to make available for others to listen to, again, to make them feel less alone, like they have a sense of community that they might not otherwise have. And then also and coping tools. So I do a couple episodes a week and it's a mixture of solo and guest episodes and yeah, it's like the most rewarding thing. So that kind of like ultimately led me into a lot of the work that I do, being sort of I was calling myself a grief coach until recently and now I'm kind of like I like grief guide better. I just don't coach is so like I'm going to coach you through this. I don't know. Like I was like I'm going to
Yeah.
guide you
With
through it.
semantics.
Like, yeah. And then the last thing is I was also served this opportunity to become a soul purpose coach. And that was after the podcast, but that was when I was like, I feel like I'm stepping into my purpose here. And I'm getting really excited about that. And now I want to take all of this a step further and help other grievers not only just cope with their in their face type of grief, but like
Yeah.
life with grief, hence the name of my podcast, right? It's like, what does all of this mean? What does all of this look like and feel like? And how do we navigate life just really realistically? And And so that kind of ties in a little bit with the losses become gains idea, because I always like to clarify that name because I think some people are sort of like, well, it's not about finding gains from your losses. I always want to give context to that. Like gains can be whatever that means for you and whatever you want it to be. I like to think of it as, okay, we go through these losses in life, right? And we can take away from that whatever we want, whatever resonates with us. Maybe it's just a different perspective on life that we didn't have before. Maybe it is more gratitude. I think people take gains very literally, but I'm like, no, no, this can
Yeah.
be more of like fantastical idea. Like, yeah, maybe it is more gratitude for what you do have versus what you don't. Maybe it is an entirely new purpose in life. Maybe it's a new career, it's a new relationship, it's whatever. So I always love to just like leave that open and just come at it from a place of curiosity. And that's the only thing that well, not the only thing. It's one of the main things I encourage grievers to do is just remain open to life and
Yeah.
everything that it has to offer and how you can rebuild. And it's not like grief might not come knocking on your door again in some capacity, but
Mm.
like it's fluid and there's ebbs and flows, and we can and should leave space for like the and both, it's like that typical like the grief and the joy and holding that duality.
I would say
Mhm.
that life is a both
Yeah.
and, not an either or,
Yes. Yes.
and especially grief, but yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so much there, and I really hope whoever's listening can take something of that, maybe it's just a piece of what Tara shared, but and it takes time, right? Like we said,
Yes.
brick by brick, step by step. It's not gonna happen overnight, and really to drop the
Yeah.
comparison and the timelines because there is no timeline in grief. It's not linear,
Mhm.
and you maybe have experienced the same type of loss, but no two people are going to have the same experience no matter what. Like
100%.
full stop, period. It's not going to
Mhm.
happen. There's so many factors that play into it, and we will maybe get that into another day, but it's just everyone's on their own unique journey. And so I really love what you've done. And yeah, you've built such an incredible community. And if it wasn't for you leaning into your intuition and doing that, you and I would have never
I
met.
know,
And
exactly.
same thing with social media, right? Like
Yeah.
I think it's so great in so many ways, but it's also very toxic, and
Mhm.
that's a whole other
Yes,
conversation
I
as well.
literally
But
have an episode
I
all
think,
about that because it's tough, yeah, especially when you're grieving. You just have
yeah,
to be
it's
very careful.
tough. And I've talked about it too. And yeah, maybe we can have another part two. But yeah, I think it's so great to connect with people.
Yeah.
And so you kind of answered one of the questions I was going to say. But one thing is, like, how would you say, as we start closing off here, is how has grief changed the way you live your life today?
In every way, in some ways. I think I just coming back to those gains, I think I just do my best to remember, well, a few things. Number 1, giving myself grace for things, like, yeah, there's times where we might need to, like, give ourselves some tough love, and
Hmm.
but it's all a learning experience, and like I was alluding
Yeah.
to earlier, right? Like, a lot of the time we're doing the best we can with what we are faced in the moment, in what we're equipped with, mind, body, spirit, all the things, and so just be gentle with yourself. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of there's a lot of opinions out there. And I've noticed and that can make grief very isolating. It can make it even more isolating because it makes us feel like we're doing something wrong or whatever. It's very easy now for people, especially with social media, to impart that on you. So just be confident. I guess I'll talk to myself. Being confident about what I'm talking about, kind of staying in my own lane, finding my tribe, so to speak, and my people. I think that's been really big for me. Making sure I'm filling up my own cup while filling up others as well. That's it's a very just that beautiful exchange of energy, right? Just making sure operating from a good place there and very, service heart and mind. And yeah, I mean, again, I kind of keep bringing up gratitude, and I know even gratitude is kind of a buzzword nowadays, and it shouldn't be because it's just, I just,
Yeah.
it's opened my eyes for many of us, the fragility of life. Usually, I
Mhm.
never could have imagined what happened to my mom would have happened to her. With my dad, I'm not going to say his wasn't surprising, but like his dad actually had prostate cancer and died of that as well. So it was a
Okay.
little less surprising, I guess, in a way, and my dad
Mhm.
was 13 years older than my mom too, I should also note. So it's like, not that I still don't consider whatever he was, 74, old, but it was just humbling. I think I've said that multiple times today, but it's true. And so
Yeah.
anytime that I'm just getting frazzled over something in life, or again, my intuition is talking to me in some way, remembering to listen to that. And it's just been a really amazing lesson in coming back into my body, listening to that, honoring that, and just knowing that with our gut and everything, it will guide us in the way that
It
we
will take
need
you
to be
places.
led. Yeah. And again, and coming at life from a place of openness and curiosity and excitement and fun and play. Oh my God, to play more and you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Laugh, like, and
Good
especially having
one.
a young daughter now too, and it just, oh my God, we can take life so seriously and ugh, just don't. Take certain things seriously, of course, but leave room for the fun and the play. And because I think, I think a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people on their deathbed and like thoughts that they have, and they're just like, people aren't regretting the money they didn't make or whatever. And so travel and culture and food and drink and stuff is big for me and my husband. We have a whole separate podcast on that. And so for me,
Yeah.
it's like experiencing life and all that has to offer. And so
Love
it's that, but also just realizing that, certain things are not as big of a deal as you think they are. The things that we like daily stressors and things that we might get kind of like antsy or nervous about or upended about, once you go through loss and stuff like this and you see how bad things can get, like certain things don't seem as bad. You know what I mean? Because
yeah,
you've been through the trenches, you know what loss looks like. So, I think I've just had
totally.
a big reality check in that way too. So I've
Yeah,
carried that with me.
I love everything you shared, and I could use that advice. So the biggest one for me is the having fun and play
Mhm.
and my inner child. Just
Yes.
yeah, and I have a lot of
So
nieces and
important.
nephews, and they bring that out in me. The laughing, the giggling, the
Yeah.
like running around, and it's something that actually I'm still working on
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah.
as we get into adulthood, speaking for myself, just so rigid
Yeah.
and so structured and like stressed all the time and anxious all the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds very morbid, but I love talking about death and dying and grief and loss. And I actually just did a whole episode on it to my previous episode. And I talked about I always think about it like if I were on my deathbed
Yeah.
today, like what would I regret? What would be the things that I wish I had done? And like I do that like often. I
Yeah.
know that's gonna sound very weird, but I
Such
think about it and
humanity.
I'm like, Sarah, like, why are you so stressed out? And in the end of the day, we've seen this, heard this many times when they ask people on their deathbed what their
Yeah.
regrets are. And it's not money, it's not any of that,
It's like
right?
relationships and
It's how you made people feel,
yeah.
your relationship, your family, your legacy. Like, what did you do of service to the world? Like, those are the things, and those ignite me.
Mhm.
And so
Beautiful.
I think about that often. So when you're sharing all that, it just so resonated. I just love it. And I check myself
Good.
sometimes. Is this really going to matter? And it's hard. It's really hard. But I feel like we are so afraid of the conversations, but we really need to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable
Yes.
with that. But, anyways, I did a whole episode on that. If you're wanting
I
to listen to
love
that,
that.
you
That's a
can. But
great topic to cover, and it's so true, and you know what, like, my parting words of the day will be like, "Life is too short to not do things that don't light you up." Wait, did that make any
yeah,
sense? Just do things that light you up, please, like,
yeah,
I think
I
that's my
got
thing.
you.
I lean into, like, my inner Marie Kondo, like, you know, just keep things around you, people, your job, whatever, that spark joy for you and light you up because
Okay.
life is too short not to have
Yeah,
that in our life.
I
It's true.
love that.
Yeah.
I thank you so much. We're gonna end off. We're gonna do a rapid fire
Ooh,
this or that,
okay.
and then we'll leave one last reflection that you have for any
Okay.
listeners. But are you
Yes.
ready? Okay. To text or phone call?
Ooh, I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna say voice notes. I've been really into voice notes lately, and it's really helped me keep in touch with, like, some of my best friends that I don't I it's
Really?
sometimes it's, like, we're too busy to get on the phone, but then, like, texting, we all kinda, like, suck at. So, yeah, kind of voice notes,
That is
actually.
so funny. Apparently, there's a lot of controversy around voice notes because some people
Oh.
hate
Oh, really?
them. And then there's so many memes about them if I come
That's
across them, I'll
so
send you, but
funny.
some people say, like, when you're leaving a voice note, you end up
Oh, yeah.
rambling
Girl,
and it
I'm
ends
a
up being
podcaster, of
long.
course, that's gonna happen. I think that's probably why I like
That's
it.
funny.
That's funny.
Okay, so voice notes,
Yeah, but otherwise
gotcha.
I would certainly phone calls, but sometimes I will say text if I'm on my Mac and I can iMessage because I can type faster.
Okay.
Very very
That's
technical with my
hilarious.
answer, but yes, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay, planner or go with the flow?
Oh, I I'm gonna cheat again, I'm somewhere in between. I'm
No.
I'm a little type A sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, but I've released a lot of that too. I've never been super type A, but, I would like to say more go with the flow, but it depends on the situation.
Yeah, that's
I'm
so
not very
funny.
good.
I'm like, that's okay. I love this.
I'm great.
Hit the town or cozy night in?
Oh, no. I love
Oh my god, are
I
you in between?
love both. It depends. I'm honestly, nowadays, I'm gonna say cozy night in. I do,
Okay.
but I going out's fun too sometimes. You gotta get social, so it depends.
Forest or ocean?
Oh, I'm gonna say ocean, but I also
Oh, that was a
but I
good.
also love the forest. I'm so bad. It depends, but you know what? I find a lot of peace at the water.
Only could pick one. You could only go to the forest, you could only go to the ocean, you'd
Ocean.
say?
Yeah.
Yeah. My friend and I just had this conversation over the weekend, so I'm like, "I'm gonna throw this in here," because I was
Yeah.
torn, and I'm like, "I like both." She's like, "But you only can pick one," and I'm like, "I
It's
can't, I
so
don't
hard
know."
because the forest and it's very grounding. We need both, so that's what's really hard, but yeah, no, the ocean, there's
Yeah,
just something about it that
yeah.
speaks to me. Yeah.
Thinker or feeler?
Feeler.
Okay.
Mhm.
Get lost in a book or binge a TV series?
Binge a TV series. I would love to say a book. It depends on the book, I guess, sometimes, because sometimes I really do get lost
I
in a book, but I don't even have time to read anymore, so I don't know.
Don't worry, you don't even wanna know how much I've binge watched in
Yeah,
the last
I'm a
year.
binger.
We'll just leave that. Rewrite the past or see the
Oh, see the
future?
future. I'm a future girly.
Okay, last question. It's more of a reflective one. You've shared a lot already, but just wrap up with this is if you could leave one message of hope and encouragement for our
Mm.
listeners, what would that be? And not maybe just not even just grief. It could be just life, grief, anything that you feel would be helpful and provide some hope and encourage people to, yeah,
Yeah.
to
Oh, I love this question. I would say, again, kind of coming back to my find things that spark joy for you. When I say that my life has truly been changed by leaning into things that light me up and dig into my creativity and my mind and all of that, like podcasting's a big one for me. Honestly, I love it. I mean, I have 2 freaking podcasts for God's sake. So, it's fascinating to me and it's fun and I can think creatively and broadly with it. This is where my planner and my go with the flow come in. But then there's a whole like creative part of it that's really fun. And so, I just encourage everyone, and this is yeah, outside of grief or not, like tapping into your purpose and what you feel you are truly here to do, because I really do feel like we all come here with a purpose. But again, it doesn't have to be what you do for your job or anything like that. I think a lot of people get kind of nitty-gritty with it. It's like no, our soul, and there's plenty of podcasts and studies and things around like this and a lot of wonderful thought leaders that I will let do the heavy lifting on this topic. But I like to think, and I am of the belief that our soul has lessons here to learn and it comes here for a reason, and we are meant to bring something so beautiful and amazing to the world, each of us, and we each have our own gifts and ways that we can bring that to life and make it happen. And especially nowadays with social media, there's a lot of imposter syndrome and all of that. And I see it affect people, and people sometimes don't even try things because they're like, oh, there's so many out there. There's a lot of podcasters out there, right? And there's a lot of us talking about grief. But I just want to encourage everyone like, you are so special, and what you bring to the world, no one else can. And so just remember that, like, with anything you put your mind to, with anything, any conversation, any job, anything, right? Like no one can do it like you. And you have this special secret sauce that no one else can replicate, and it's magically yours. And I just, the more I've heard that over the years, the more confident I have felt, the more like in touch I've gotten with myself and what interests me, and that continues to grow and evolve and change as well. So I also want to just put that out there too. Even I felt like I found it, and actually very right now recently I feel like I'm going through kind of a little bit of an existential crisis. I'm like, because since I've gone through all of the losses and things that I have, new interests and projects and things have come up for me that have nothing to do with grief and loss. And I've been struggling with that. I'm like, where do I lean in? But it's because I've allowed myself to have this really abundant, beautiful, amazing life with my grief in tow, sure, but it's not my whole personality. It kind of once was. So I almost feel like I'm going through a little identity crisis in that way. So if I'm being fully transparent, but like I don't see that as a bad thing because that means I'm growing and I see it as a good thing. So I guess I would just say that. I would just encourage everyone to have fun with that, get curious about it. Don't feel pressure to find it. I truly believe like we can co-create with the universe, it will find you. And
Mhm.
it's an amazing process to watch unfold and happen. You don't even like know what's happening sometimes when you really lean into it. So just have
I
fun with that.
I love all of that. I agree with that. It resonates so deeply. And yeah, just like having fun with it and leaning into that because your intuition is something when you get connected with it and you're one with it, it
Mhm.
can really be so profound.
Yeah,
And your story is such a testament to that with your daughter.
yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much. I know there's a
you.
lot
Yeah,
covered here in today's episode, but I really appreciate you being so open and vulnerable about your story because I know it's not easy. And yeah, you're maybe what 6 years out,
mhm.
but you still navigate it, and we all do. And just that part about this is the whole story our podcast is we're meant to be here on earth to grow and evolve. And so I hope this was helpful in any way, even if it was just one takeaway that you had from it, just reflecting on that. And so thank you for sharing all of that, Tara. And then lastly, I'll put it in the show notes, but where are you most active on in terms of social media, or where is the best place to reach you if people want to? Again, I'll put it in the show notes, but if you want to just
Yeah.
let listeners know.
Totally, yeah. Ultimately, you can find me just on my website is a great place to start. So lossesbecomegains.com. You can find my little mini programs, work with me one-on-one, all of that good stuff is there. Just get to know me a little bit better. But I would say most active on Instagram. So at Losses Become Gains and at Life with Grief Podcast. I'm on TikTok for the podcast as well. YouTube, you can also watch my podcast there. And then yeah, my podcast, Life with Grief, you can get anywhere you enjoy your podcast. So yeah, I would love to connect. I love meeting fellow grievers that are also walking this path and doing all the
Yeah.
things and trying to live life and have a 9 to 5 and, it's we're all in this together. So
Yeah. Come join the not
yeah,
asked for grief
yeah,
club.
exactly, where we laugh and
Just
smile actually.
we didn't ask to be here, but we're
Yeah,
here, and
we're
it can be
here.
fun. It can be playful, it can be humorous, and it can be
Yeah,
sad, and that's
all the
okay.
things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see everyone for next episode soon. Okay, bye.